Hello all, and welcome to Kilroy's Deep Dive on D-Day Games bonus footage. Yes, I just got done with a three-part series doing a Kilroy's Deep Dive, which is basically taking a look at a topic and taking it down level by scale, by military scale. And so I did a three-part series. And even then, it was really, each episode was really long, even though I divided it up into three parts. Each episode was more than I expected, and I still had more to cover. So this is the leftovers. Actually, that's an inappropriate term. There's nothing left over about these. These are all fine games in their own right. But as I was doing the series, I had to make some choices. And so I put these off to the side to cover in this bonus footage. As we're looking at scale, most of these all end up in that final category, down at the lowest level of small unit tactical, which is basically platoon, squad, and individual level type of combat in each one of these, except for maybe some of the Lambo books and maybe the Patterson book might be a little bit higher than small unit tactical, but the rest of these are kind of fall well within that SUT or small unit tactical framework. Now, why didn't these make it? Well, some of these didn't make it because, again, I had to make choices to fit it within the segments I had. Also, some of these I had forgotten about. I as I was going through my whole filming process, and I was like kind of looking at my list and looking at my shelves, some of these I just kind of missed, or I thought about them, and then by the time I started filming, I had forgot about them. So one of the hazards, one of the first world hazards of owning a lot of games, a veritable ton of games, it's kind of hard to keep track of all the things that I have and what I cover from time to time. So, so there was part of that, and there was part of it that I said, well, I just want to. Some of these are not as dedicated to D-Day. They have supplements or modules that go into D-Day a little bit more. For example, Combat Commander, but there are some either D-Day references or Normandy battle references in these games, so I felt that they do fit within the D-Day. This one right here that has D-Day on the title, how did I miss that one? I mean, that was one that I just missed, and to be quite frank with you, I think a lot of people miss Frontline D-Day, and so we're going to start with Frontline D-Day because it, like a lot of these games, have unique mechanisms, and that's one of the things that's common about this list of bonus footage is all these games have different perspectives on combat and have a different approach to combat. It's not your typical hex and counter type affair when you're dealing with these games. And again, that's something that I'm really big on. I like different perspectives. I like different points of view. I like taking a look at common engagement or common problem and taking a look at it from a different perspective and see if there's a different solution to it. And that's one reason why I play war games, and that's one reason I like about these games, this special bonus footage, because each one of these brings their own unique perspective to gameplay and to D-Day and their own unique mechanics to it. So Frontline D-Day is actually kind of a precursor to Warfighter, which is where we kind of ended up at on the third part 3 of my D-Day dive, and this is from Dan Verssen Games, or DVG, and as you can see here, that's a card game, kind of like Warfighter, and you're going to have individual soldier cards, and they're going to have abilities, and they're going to have like ranges for their weapons and stuff. So I mean, this isn't Warfighter, but feels like some of the seeds of Warfighter were in this game from Dan Verssen. over time. It had action cards here. Well, what does that sound familiar to you? So you had soldier cards and action cards. Now, you didn't have individual equipment cards, but they were kind of built into the cards themselves. And you had location cards that you were kind of fighting over locations. So in some respects, this, and he might have, I think I might have read something on this. This was definitely a precursor to one of his games, which I think became the precursor to Warfighter. I think that's how the lineage goes. But it's a World War II tactical infantry card combat game, kind of trying to go back to, harkening back to maybe Frontline, not Frontline, Upfront, the card game from the early 80s, which was basically trying to take small unit tactical combat and portray it in a card game format. This kind of feels a little bit or kind of a nod back to that, but does it in a different way. And this didn't go any further than this. I don't know if they even had any expansions to this. I think it just kind of evolved and evolved, I guess, into that other game and then into Warfighter eventually. But you can see seeds of it here in Frontline. Along that same line is Point Blank, V is for Victory. This is a lock and load offering that just came out last year and is again, up front. It is a card game, and you have you can either play it on a board with putting some markers to mark out grids, or they have a paper map in here that has grids as well. But basically, this is a card game. So you're going to have all your units are going to be represented by different cards. They have special abilities. You're going to have kind of an action deck. Again, what does that harken back to? Where you can match up symbols from the action deck up to the symbols of the different units and move them around on a board, but you're kind of moving them around on a grid. But it's a very engaging game and can be played 2-player or solitaire. I prefer actually the solitaire portion of it. You've got leaders and you have special equipment and you have, of course, vehicles and tanks. So it's got all the stuff you'd want to have on that. And this has some D-Day scenarios in it. And I think they're actually working on an expansion for this as well. But there's a lot of game in this box, and I'll put a link to any game that I've covered in the past. I'll put a link to it in my description. But there's a lot of game in this box, and this is yet a different approach than Frontline D-Day, but it is a card approach, and it's got a different combat system, and the combat system that it relies predominantly on is the lock and load tactical combat system. So if you're familiar with the lock and load tactical combat system and want a card-based game where you're moving cards around, not counters around on a board, but actual cards on a grid to represent your units, which is the same as Frontline D-Day and Warfighter for that matter, then Point Blank V is for Victory is something you might want to look at. And there's a lot. As I said, this is a hefty box, and there is a lot in there. Speaking about card games or card-based games, I'd be remiss if we didn't go to Combat Commander Europe. Now, one of the reasons I didn't put this in the main list is because this is definitely a squad level, one of the premier squad level games, and is as on a lot of people's list as a love-hate relationship. They either love it because of the uniqueness of play, because it's all based on the cards. You have to have the right card action in your hand to do anything. If you want to fire, you have to have a fire card. If you want to move, you have to have a move card. There's more to it than that, and that also brings in the hate, because people like to be able to have a top-down view of their units and know that if I have that unit, I can move them there and I can shoot that guy over here. This one really installs or tries to simulate, the fog of war, the chaos of war, the chaos of command, and puts you in the shoes of a commander of saying, why aren't they moving? Well, you don't know what's going on at that particular location, and a lot of things could be happening, and that's all represented by this kind of random set of cards. Now, the cards are multiple use. They're actually used as dice. There's no dice in the game, so there's a lot of stuff going on in this game. This is definitely, if you want to look at a different perspective on small unit tactical combat, especially squad level combat, the Combat and Commander system is definitely something you need to take a look at. Now, if you don't, the people that are naysayers on it, tend to think that it gets a little gamey because you're trying to get that right hand of cards, or you're trying to get a hand of cards, or you might be stuck with not really a lot of optimal choices to do. And so if you don't like that, then stay away. But you actually have counters. It looks a lot like Squad Leader, Advanced Squad Leader, or a lot of the other tactical games as far as the counters, the units, and the maps. But it's the card play that is the engine to this. So that, along with Frontline and Point Blank, are some of your card-based games. Then we have these books here. These are solo war games books, and I've done a lot of war game books, especially solo war game books, over the last couple of years. With COVID, these became a thing, right? And war game books have always been around. You can look at some of my playlists of some of the earlier war game books, but they really kind of had a resurgence during this time period, and Worthington came out with several as well. But Mike Lambeau has done several of these, Fields of Normandy 2, Beaches for the Brave, and this covers the beaches that I'm covering each day this week, right, with my postcard games coverage. All those beaches are covered in here, and they got Battles of Normandy as well. So, but these tend to be a little bit more close to hex encounter. You can see hexes there, and you can make your counters, or you can mark in some of these books. They're kind of meant to be, they're originally designed to mark it in, like the first one, I believe, was like the Fields of Normandy. It's kind of you mark in the book and keep track of your troops there. But eventually he started adding sample counters, and then other people started adding their own counters. Other people started either making up counters, or you can use blocks, or you can use toy soldiers. Hey, how about that? We can find a use for that. Now you have a reason why you kept those around. But you can use whatever to mark where the units are on here. But each one of these is its own, AI, and what orders you can do, and what the opponent's going to do, and then you mark your stuff on the board. And there's different scenarios, and each of these games, he has several more, but these are all ones that deal with Normandy, battles around Normandy, and then, of course, Beaches of the Brave is covering, Utah Beach, Gold Beach, Juno Beach, Sword Beach, Omaha Beach, Point du Hoc. So it's covering all the main, plus it's got some Pacific beaches in there as well, but it's covering all the major beaches in that regard. So again, the unique perspective on this is that it's in a book format. I mean, there's a little bit of do-it-yourself, but it's in a book format. These aren't that expensive. You can pick these up and try out a scenario or two. It's not going to have the chrome and the glitz and the player aids and all the stuff that you expect in a box game, but it's still going to have a lot of play in these books, and is an interesting approach to wargaming in a book format, and covers Normandy in that regard. And keeping with the books, you have Roll for Omaha. Now, this is really a roll and write, and it says it right on the cover here. So Noah Patterson has several, really plays in the RPG space with games and books, but he's got a new one, I think, coming out too. But this is Roll for Omaha, where it's a little bit of Yahtzee-like, right? You are going to be doing the different beach landings, and trying to get to take out the German positions. So, and you're going to be rolling, and there's actually an advance table, an attack table, an air bombing and landing table, and bombardment table. So you've got a lot of combat factors in here that look a lot like a regular war game, but your board and your units and your counters are all right here. It's a grid where you're rolling dice and you're marking boxes off, and with the use of all these charts to try to take out the German positions. So this is, again, very abstract compared to all these other games. And this is one I just forgot. It was on my shelf, and I was like, yeah, I need to talk about that one, and I just didn't get to it. Now, scale-wise, I'd have to go back and look at this. This might be a little bit higher scale than the small unit tactical that we ended up on part 3. This would probably find its way into part 2, I would imagine, of my deep dive. So Roll for Omaha 1944. Then we have American Tank Aches. There are some, it starts in June of 44. So you can, I don't know if it really portrays the landings per se, because you got tanks involved. So these are once the tanks have come ashore, and you are an American Tank Ace. So you're controlling a tank. And this is done in a Gregory M. Smith style. He's known for his solitaire games. He's done a lot of air games. He's done sub games. and now he's going to tank games, and he was a tanker by trade, so he probably knows his stuff here. Wasn't a tanker in World War II, but he probably knows his tank stuff. So but this is a solitaire game, just came out last year or beginning of this year, and this is a solid one. It's kind of a charty kind of game. It falls in the line or in the lineage of B-17, Queen of the Skies, where you're rolling on charts and seeing what happens. But this one does have more decisions. You have kind of this focal point where you are controlling the tank and you're attacking different areas. And let's get the board here. I don't have all the counters pushed out on this one, or I think I have them somewhere else. But you're gonna have your battle tank right here, where you're going to keep track of all the different crew and what's going on with them with skills and stuff like that. So it has a little bit of an RPG feel to it as well. And then you actually have a couple of mounted boards in here, which are nice. And the counters themselves, geez, I got hit. We took a hit. So so here is the overall board. So as far as D-Day, you're going to be dealing with St. Lo right here. And as far as the on the operational skills, and these are the ways you're kind of doing your campaign, again, it's a little bit more of a campaign or RPG type feel as you're advancing on, and you're getting more skills and trying to keep your crew alive. But this is the battle board, and so you're going to be in one of these positions here, and then the enemies are going to be all around here. And the way it's set up is that you are like a flank or a wing of a tank battalion or platoon, and there's other action going on, but this is your segment and what you're encountering, and what's happening with the other pieces of the battle will affect you as well. But these are the units that you're engaging. So so it's got some, it starts in June, but again, not so much on D-Day, I don't think, as is for after D-Day and advancing inland. But American Tank Ace, solitaire game, if I didn't say that, because he's known for his solitaire games. But that's a good one to look at as well. And then you have Combat 2. And the reason why I kept Combat 2 out of this list initially, because it has, you can play, I guess, D-Day scenarios. I don't think it doesn't really have terrain for the beaches and like that. It's more into the land and as after the landings type combat. And I think Combat 2, this is Volume 1, Combat 2 actually has scenarios for D-Day or for Normandy. I think it's a little bit more focused on that in that regard. At least that's my understanding. I don't have Combat 2, which is out. So, and this is both this and American Tank Ace are from Compass Games. And but there is some June type scenarios in here. This is, again, as I said in my previous videos, the more detailed you get, the lower you go in the scale, the more you go down to the squad level or even the individual level, the actions become a little bit more abstract and a little bit more ahistorical. Because, how do you know that this group of individuals encountered that a specific group of German soldiers, right? So the more granular you get, the more, I think, blurry I think it becomes as far as what was the true history of it. And so a lot of these scenarios are, you can just, it was these units and you can do this, going up against these kind of units, and you're just mainly playing the mechanics, and you've got the type of weapons, you've got the type of units, you've got the type of terrain, but I don't know how much of a simulation value there is, but that we can leave that for another day. But this is a very unique system, and this is down to actually squad to individual level. So this goes all the way down from the squad down to the actual individual level. So this would definitely fit well, probably right above Warfighter, or right in the same sweet spot as Warfighter from my part 3. And but it's kind of has a program system of combat. So you've got big paper maps in here, but you're going to have these chits that you put out for the AI for the Germans. And it's going to tell you what they're doing. Like this is sprint, and let's see, what does that say right there? Run and gun and evade. And so you're going to be you're going to be issuing orders to your units or moving them on the board. But the AI is going to have these kind of pre-programmed chits that's going to tell them what they do, and they're going to be dependent upon the it's going to be dependent upon the unit and depending upon the scenario of what kind of chits you put in there, what's available. But they're going to have these kind of pre-programmed orders, and that's how they move. So you're going to do your movements, and then they're going to react based on how they're programmed, right? And so it's a very interesting system of how it's put in there. You're not having to chart and do pre-programming, writing stuff down. It's all done with the use of the chits. So again, a very unique perspective on combat and the way it does the mechanics there. So, but again, I kind of left it out because this isn't really focused as much on D-Day, but I think that Combat 2 might do that. So anyway, that is the bonus footage of some of the games I thought I would share with you as well. If you watched all 3 episodes and you're the kind of person that looks at the DVD bonus footage and sees the outtakes and all that other stuff, well, this is for you then. This is all the outtakes and stuff that just didn't make it to the 3-part episode of Kilroy's deep dive on D-Day games during D-Day special week. But I thought these warranted enough of another look so that you would want to, I really feel like I should need to share this stuff with you as well, because there's some really good gameplay in here. And as I said, maybe the best way I should say is I saved the best for last, because you can't go wrong with any of these games as far as if you want something a little different, that plays a little bit different, that's not just your, I go, you go, or your standard hex encounter with the combat results table. There is something different and unique in each one of these games, and there's different levels of play and there's different levels of complexity. Overall, these games are not super complex, right? This isn't none of these are monster games. None of these have 40-page rule books. Our Combat Commander has a few pages, but again, Combat Commander has got one of the better written rule books, I think, of rule books that I've read, and at least what it's known for. Point Blank's got a pretty hefty rule book, but it's not that complex of a game. It's just trying to get through the notion of translating a grid into and movement of your cards along that grid. It takes a little bit of extra words to do that. The only complicated rule from my perspective in Point Blank V is for Victory is the line of sight. They go through quite a bit of detail or discussion on line of sight, because this is the way the grid works out. The grid is the grid is actually replicating the range of where the units are and who can see who and who can attack who. So I mean that's again, I'm making it sound more complicated than it is, but it is a little bit. The first read through that is a little bit like what, but you eventually get it. But that is not a complicated game. Combat is really not a complicated game, but getting used to those orders and how those play out and how you react to it. Once you get in the game and you start playing it, it starts humming. But if you haven't played a game that has like pre-programmed orders and how that works, then that takes a little bit of getting used to. Anyway, as I go on too much on this, as I said, I saved the best for last. I hope that if you liked the 3-part series, I hope you stayed around for the bonus footage, because I think this is where at least for me, where the sweet spot is. There's a lot of good stuff here to explore. That is some of it is directly on D-Day, and some of it is a little bit like Beaches of the Prey, and some of it is a little bit more adjacent to D-Day, but worth a look. Thank you so much for stopping by, and love to know your comments. What do you think about anything that I've covered on my deep dive on parts 1 through 3 on this bonus footage? What do you think about these games? I covered a lot more games in this, but I didn't go into as much of a detail and pulling everything out. And if you want me to cover more on any one of these, let me know. I'll put links to what I have covered already, but more than happy to dive into more on this if you want me to. Again, love your comments, and most of all, I love you just the fact you stopped by and watched. Whether you watched a second or the whole doggone thing, I appreciate you. Have a good one. Thanks for watching.